The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The night air on Valora was calm, but Markin could feel the weight of what was coming. The Dravik swarm was still out there, growing stronger and moving closer. Markin stood on the palace balcony, beside Queen Valera. The three moons hung low, casting a soft light over the city below. Round them, Velari warriors rested after the hard fight, but their eyes were sharp, ready for the next challenge. Valera spoke quietly. "You have done well, Markin. The Velari will never forget your courage." Markin nodded. "I could not have done it without your people's strength. We are stronger together." The queen smiled, a rare softness in her eyes. "This alliance between our worlds, it may be the key to survival. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it." In the days that followed, Markin worked closely with the Velari Council. Human and Velari engineers shared knowledge, improving weapons and defenses. Soldiers trained side by side, learning each other's ways. Markin found himself learning not just about Velari combat, but about their history, their honor, and their deep respect for the land. And in return, he taught them about human resilience and creativity. One evening, as the twin suns set, Markin visited the desert where his trial had begun. The canyon looked peaceful now, but he remembered the dangers he had faced: the sandworm, the stone crawlers, the narrow ledges. A voice spoke behind him. It was Ryan. "You have changed, Velora. Human, not just in battle, but in spirit." Markin smiled. "And Velora has changed me." They stood together, looking out over the desert, feeling the quiet strength of the land. Months passed. Reports came that the Dravik swarm was retreating, their forces weakened by the unexpected resistance. The alliance between humans and Velari was becoming a symbol of hope for many other worlds. One day, Queen Valera called Markin to the throne room. Her expression was serious but hopeful. "The war is not over," she said, "but thanks to you, we have a chance to protect our homes. I want you to be my ambassador, to carry the message of unity to other planets." Markin bowed. "I accept, Your Majesty. Together, we will build a future where no world faces the darkness alone." Before Markin left Velora, Valera took his hand in a rare gesture of friendship. "Remember, human, you are no longer just a visitor. You are a part of Velora's story." Markin looked into her eyes, feeling a bond stronger than any alliance. "And you are a part of Earth's future." As Markin boarded the solar wing to begin his journey home, he looked back at the glowing towers of Velora one last time. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready, because now he was not just a human envoy. He was a warrior, a friend, and a symbol of hope. The stars stretched out before him, vast and shining, and with the strength of two worlds behind him. Markin felt certain that humanity's place in the galaxy was only just beginning. The planet Varelia was a world of silver mountains, glowing rivers, and skies painted with two suns. Its people were proud and strong, known across the galaxy for their tall frames, fine armor, and strict sense of honor. For centuries, they had guarded their borders fiercely, keeping invaders away. But now, their power was at risk. Queen Alvara sat upon the high throne of the Crystal Hall, her emerald cloak spread neatly across the steps. She was young for a ruler, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen many battles. The Varalian Empire was facing new troubles, not from war alone, but from politics. The Drakthar Empire, fierce and cunning, was pushing at their borders. Old allies were growing distant. Trade routes were being stolen. The High Council whispered of solutions. Some wanted stronger armies, some wanted new weapons. But one idea, strange and bold, came from the Queen herself. Birth. She said during the council meeting, her voice calm but firm, "We form an alliance with Earth." The hall fell silent. Humans were known, but not considered powerful in the same way as Varelians. They were clever, yes, skilled in certain trades, yes, but warriors? Few Varelians thought so. An older general named Tharn stood, his silver armor gleaming. "My queen, forgive me, but what can Earth offer us in strength? They're softer than us." Alvara's lips curved into a faint smile. Strength comes in many forms, General. And so the decision was made. To bind the two worlds, a marriage would take place between Queen Alvara of Varelia and a chosen representative of Earth. The day of arrival came quickly. The palace gates opened, and through them walked a human man named Rian. He was not the kind of warrior the Varelian guards expected. He wore no shining armor, only a dark, well-tailored coat. His frame was lean, not bulky. His dark hair was tied back neatly, and his eyes, calm and steady, seemed to take in everything around him. The Queen's advisors exchanged quiet glances. Some hid small smiles, thinking the human looked more like a diplomat than a soldier. Perhaps this marriage truly was only a political play. Rian bowed deeply before Alvara. "Your Majesty," he said in a voice clear and respectful. "Welcome to Varelia, Rian of Earth," she replied, her tone formal. "From this day forward, our worlds are bound." The wedding was a grand event. The crystal hall was lit by golden torches, and flowers from every province were brought to fill the air with fragrance. Varelian warriors stood in ceremonial armor, their faces proud, while human envoys watched with careful eyes as the ceremony ended. The Queen placed a silver ring on Rian's hand. He did not flinch, did not seem nervous. He only looked at her with a calm expression, as if nothing about this great moment unsettled him. Life in the palace began. Rian was given fine chambers, close to the Queen's own. Servants offered him food and drink from every corner of Varelia, though he often ate simply, preferring fresh bread and tea. He spent his days walking the gardens, speaking with human and Varelian staff alike. He asked questions about the city, about its defenses, about the people's customs. The Queen noticed his quiet way of moving. He did not rush, did not boast, but his eyes always seemed to be studying something. At council meetings, he rarely spoke. When he did, his words were short and thoughtful. Some council members ignored him, others listened, though they were unsure if his ideas carried weight. One evening, the Queen invited him to the high balcony overlooking the capital. The lights of the city shimmered like stars below. "Tell me," she asked, "what do you think of Varelia so far?" Rian looked out at the towers and bridges. "It is alive," he said, "strong in spirit. Your people stand tall, but they also carry pride like a shield. Sometimes that is a good thing. Sometimes it is not." Alvar raised an eyebrow. "And Earth, how do you compare it? Different." He said, "We use fewer shields, more doors. We let more people in." The Queen studied him for a moment. He was unlike the men she commanded in her armies. There was no hunger for glory in his voice, no need to prove himself. She wondered if he would ever truly fit into Varelian life. Weeks passed, and word of trouble came again. The Drakthar Empire had raided a border outpost. Supplies were stolen, and villages had been forced to flee. The Queen called her generals to the war hall to plan a response. Rian was invited, but as soon as he stepped inside, General Tharn's voice cut across the room. "Your Majesty, perhaps the human would prefer to wait outside. This is a matter for warriors." The Queen's gaze hardened. "Rian is my husband. He stays still." The general spoke over him, laying out maps and arguing about troop numbers. Rian stood quietly at the edge, his hands behind his back. He said nothing, but his eyes scanned the map, memorizing every position, every supply line. That night, Rian could not sleep. He walked the palace corridors in silence, the stone floors cool under his steps. Passing near the eastern tower, he heard faint voices. The figures stood in shadow, speaking in a language no Varelian guard should know, but Rian knew it. It was the speech of the Outer Rim mercenaries, hired blades often used by the Drakthar. "The signal will come soon," one whispered. "Then the gate will fall," the other replied. Rian's jaw tightened. He stepped back into the shadows before they could see him. Quietly, he followed them, noting where they went, how they moved, what insignias they wore under their cloaks. By the time he returned to his chambers, he had a plan forming in his mind. The Queen, meanwhile, lay in her own chamber, Unaware of the silent watch her new husband was keeping over the palace. She still thought of him as a man of peace, a figure of diplomacy, yet something in his calm eyes made her wonder. Who exactly was Rion of Earth, and why did he seem so ready for a storm that had not yet begun? The planet Varelia was a world of silver mountains, glowing rivers, and skies painted with two suns. Its people were proud and strong, known across the galaxy for their tall frames, fine armor, and strict sense of honor. For centuries, they had guarded their borders fiercely, keeping invaders away. But now, their power was at risk. Queen Alvara sat upon the high throne of the Crystal Hall, her emerald cloak spread neatly across the steps. She was young for a ruler, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen many battles. The Varelian Empire was facing new troubles, not from war alone, but from politics. The Drakthar Empire, fierce and cunning, was pushing at their borders. Old allies were growing distant. Trade routes were being stolen. The High Council whispered of solutions. Some wanted stronger armies, some wanted new weapons. But one idea, strange and bold, came from the Queen herself. Birth. She said during the council meeting, her voice calm but firm, "We form an alliance with Earth." The hall fell silent. Humans were known, but not considered powerful in the same way as Varelians. They were clever, yes, skilled in certain trades, yes, but warriors? Few Varelians thought so. An older general named Tharn stood, his silver armor gleaming. "My queen, forgive me, but what can Earth offer us in strength? They're softer than us." Alvara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Strength comes in many forms, General." And so the decision was made. To bind the two worlds, a marriage would take place between Queen Alvara of Varelia and a chosen representative of Earth. The day of arrival came quickly. The palace gates opened, and through them walked a human man named Rion. He was not the kind of warrior the Varelian guards expected. He wore no shining armor, only a dark, well-tailored coat. His frame was lean, not bulky. His dark hair was tied back neatly, and his eyes, calm and steady, seemed to take in everything around him. The Queen's advisors exchanged quiet glances. Some hid small smiles, thinking the human looked more like a diplomat than a soldier. Perhaps this marriage truly was only a political play. Rion bowed deeply before Alvara. "Your Majesty," he said in a voice clear and respectful. "Welcome to Varelia, Rion of Earth," she replied, her tone formal. "From this day forward, our worlds are bound." The wedding was a grand event. The Crystal Hall was lit by golden torches, and flowers from every province were brought to fill the air with fragrance. Varelian warriors stood in ceremonial armor, their faces proud, while human envoys watched with careful eyes. As the ceremony ended, the Queen placed a silver ring on Rion's hand. He did not flinch, did not seem nervous. He only looked at her with a calm expression, as if nothing about this great moment unsettled him. Life in the palace began. Rion was given fine chambers, close to the Queen's own. Servants offered him food and drink from every corner of Varelia, though he often ate simply, preferring fresh bread and tea. He spent his days walking the gardens, speaking with human and Varelian staff alike. He asked questions about the city, about its defenses, about the people's customs. The Queen noticed his quiet way of moving. He did not rush, did not boast, but his eyes always seemed to be studying something. At council meetings, he rarely spoke. When he did, his words were short and thoughtful. Some council members ignored him, others listened, though they were unsure if his ideas carried weight. One evening, the Queen invited him to the high balcony overlooking the capital. The lights of the city shimmered like stars below. "Tell me," she asked, "what do you think of Varelia so far?" Rion looked out at the towers and bridges. "It is alive," he said, "strong in spirit. Your people stand tall, but they also carry pride like a shield. Sometimes that is a good thing. Sometimes it is not." Alvar raised an eyebrow. "And Earth, how do you compare it? Different." He said, "We use fewer shields, more doors. We let more people in." The Queen studied him for a moment. He was unlike the men she commanded in her armies. There was no hunger for glory in his voice, no need to prove himself. She wondered if he would ever truly fit into Varelian life. Weeks passed, and word of trouble came again. The Drakthar Empire had raided a border outpost. Supplies were stolen, and villages had been forced to flee. The queen called her generals to the war hall to plan a response. Rian was invited, but as soon as he stepped inside, General Tharn's voice cut across the room. "Your Majesty, perhaps the human would prefer to wait outside. This is a matter for warriors." The queen's gaze hardened. "Rian is my husband. He stays." Still, the general spoke over him, laying out maps and arguing about troop numbers. Rian stood quietly at the edge, his hands behind his back. He said nothing, but his eyes scanned the map, memorizing every position, every supply line. That night, Rian could not sleep. He walked the palace corridors in silence. The stone floors cool under his steps. Passing near the eastern tower, he heard faint voices. The figures stood in shadow, speaking in a language no Varelian guard should know. But Rian knew it. It was the speech of the Outer Rim mercenaries, hired blades often used by the Drakthar. "The signal will come soon," one whispered. "Then the gate will fall," the other replied. Rian's jaw tightened. He stepped back into the shadows before they could see him. Quietly, he followed them, noting where they went, how they moved, what insignias they wore under their cloaks. By the time he returned to his chambers, he had a plan forming in his mind. The queen, meanwhile, lay in her own chamber, unaware of the silent watch her new husband was keeping over the palace. She still thought of him as a man of peace, a figure of diplomacy, yet something in his calm eyes made her wonder. Who exactly was Rian of Earth, and why did he seem so ready for a storm that had not yet begun? The palace of Varelia stood tall under the twin suns, its crystal towers glowing softly in the morning light. From the outside, it seemed peaceful, but inside its walls, tension was growing. Reports from the border were arriving daily, more villages raided, more caravans missing. The Drakthar Empire was testing the queen's patience. In the war hall, Queen Alvara sat with her generals. The long table was covered with maps, showing red lines along the outer provinces. "They are moving faster," General Tharn said, his voice low but firm. "If we do not send more troops to the border, they will reach the river settlements within the month." Another general shook his head. "If we stretch our forces too thin, the capital will be exposed." The discussion turned into an argument, voices clashing like steel. Rian sat at the far end of the table, silent as usual. His eyes moved between the maps and the faces of the generals. He noted how some pushed for rash action, while others wanted to delay. Both sides had weaknesses. When the queen asked for his thoughts, Rian spoke simply. "Your defenses are strong in numbers, but weaken the lines between them. The Drakthar will not attack the front. They will slip through where you are not looking." A few generals scoffed quietly. Tharn's voice was cold. "We have defended our borders for centuries without the help of human tactics." Alvar's gaze silenced the room. "We will consider all advice," she said, her tone making it clear that her husband's words were not to be dismissed. That night, Rian walked alone again. Since the night he had overheard the strange voices in the eastern tower, he had made a habit of moving quietly through the palace at odd hours. It gave him a sense of the place, where the guards stood, which halls stayed lit, which doors were locked. He returned to the same tower where he had heard the mercenaries. At first, it was empty, but after a while, the shadowed figures appeared again. They spoke in that same rough language, their words sharp and hurried. "New orders," one said. "The signal will be in 3 days. The gate will open from inside." Rian's mind worked quickly. An attack on the capital from within. That meant the Drakthar already had help inside the palace walls. He kept his distance as they left, following at just the right space to avoid being seen. The two men slipped into a small side door near the lower barracks, a place where supplies were stored. Rian marked the door in his mind. The next morning, Rian found himself in the palace gardens, pretending to enjoy the warm sunlight. He was not alone. Queen Alvara walked the path slowly, her cloak brushing against the flowers. "You seem restless," she said, stopping beside him. Rian looked at her, choosing his words. "Do you trust every guard within your walls?" The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you ask?" "There are movements at night, conversations in languages I did not expect to hear here." Her gaze stayed fixed on him. "You have proof." "Not enough to act openly," he said. "If I accuse without evidence, your own council may think I am stirring trouble." Alvara studied him for a moment. "Find me proof, Rian of Earth, and if you are right, I will act." The next two nights were spent in shadow. Rian moved like a silent wind, slipping between pillars and arches. He avoided patrols, memorized their routes, and stayed in the blind spots. His old instincts, the ones he had buried when he left Earth's defense corps, returned as naturally as breathing. Finally, on the third night, the moment came. The two mercenaries returned, joined by a third man, of Aurelian Pal's guard. His armor bore the crest of the Queen's own household. Rian listened closely from the darkness. "The Queen will be in council at midday," the guard whispered. "That is when the gates will open. Your forces must be ready to enter before." The alarm is sounded. The mercenaries nodded. "The Drakthar commander will be pleased." Rian's jaw tightened. Now he had what he needed, but it was dangerous. If he simply told the Queen, the traitor could vanish before being caught. No, he needed to catch them in the act. The next day, the Queen held her usual council meeting. Rian stayed quiet, but his mind was focused on the lower barracks. When the meeting ended, he asked Alvara for a private word. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "by midday tomorrow, be ready with your strongest warriors at the eastern gate. But do not close the council early. Make sure the traitor believes you are distracted." She gave him a searching look. "You are certain?" "Yes," he replied simply. "If I am wrong, you may strip me of every title and send me back to Earth." The following day, the plan unfolded. At midday, while the Queen and her council discussed trade routes, Rian was already in the lower barracks. He hid in the shadows as the traitor approached the small door with the two mercenaries. The guard glanced around, then pressed a hidden switch. The gate's locking mechanism clicked open. That was all Rian needed. He moved with sudden speed, catching the guard's wrist before he could step through. The mercenaries reached for weapons, but Rian struck first, a sharp blow to the first man's arm, sending his blade clattering to the floor. The second lunged, but Rian sidestepped, using the man's own momentum to throw him against the wall. The guard tried to pull free, but Rian twisted his arm just enough to force him to his knees. "It's over," Rian said coldly. Within seconds, Varelian soldiers appeared, led by Queen Alvara herself. She looked at the scene without speaking, her eyes taking in the defeated mercenaries and the captured traitor. "You were right," she said at last, "completely right. The traitor was taken away, and the mercenaries were locked in the palace prison. The eastern gate was sealed with stronger locks." That night, Alvara found Rian on the balcony, looking out over the quiet city. "You move like one of my finest warriors today," she said. Rian did not look at her. "I have fought before, long before I came here." "I see that now," she replied. "Perhaps I should begin to listen more closely when you speak of war." For the first time since his arrival, Rian allowed himself a small smile. "Perhaps you should." The Queen turned back toward the palace, but her mind was full of questions. Who exactly was this human she had married, and how deep did his skills truly go? The palace of Varelia was more secure than ever after the traitor at the eastern gate had been caught. New patrols were assigned, locks were reinforced, and guards were rotated more often. Yet Queen Alvara knew this was only the beginning. The Drakthar Empire would not give up so easily. In the days that followed, small problems began to appear. Supplies meant for the army went missing. Communication towers between the provinces stopped working. A shipment of food for the border villages was spoiled before it reached them. The council believed these were accidents, but Rian did not. "They are testing us," he told Alvara one morning as they walked in the royal gardens. "The Drakthar are watching how quickly you respond. They want to see where the palace is slow to act." You speak as if you know their methods, she replied, her eyes studying him. Rian looked at the flowers instead of her face. I have seen this kind of game before. That night, the palace grew quiet under the light of the twin moons. Most of the guards were posted at the main gates, confident no enemy could slip inside. But deep in the queen's private chambers, silence was broken by the faintest sound. The scrape of a lock being turned. Alvara, still half awake, reached for the short blade she kept at her bedside. Before she could rise, a shadow moved across the wall. Then another. 3 figures entered, their faces covered, their steps light as air. One assassin moved toward her bed, raising a curved blade. The next moment, a blur crossed the room. It was Rian. He caught the assassin's wrist before the blade could fall, twisting it until the weapon dropped to the floor. In the same movement, he stepped to the side, pulling the attacker off balance and sending him crashing into the wall. The second assassin lunged from behind, but Rian turned sharply, his elbow striking the attacker's chest. A sharp kick followed, knocking the man down before he could recover. The third assassin tried to flee toward the window, but Rian was faster. He grabbed the man's cloak and yanked him backward, slamming the window shut with his other hand. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Queen Alvara stood frozen for a moment, her blade still in hand, watching her husband move with precision that even her finest warriors would envy. Guards rushed into the room, but the danger was already over. Rian stood calmly in the center, the 3 attackers on the floor, disarmed, and groaning in pain. They are alive, he said to the guards. Question them, find out who sent them. The guards dragged the attackers away. Alvara's eyes stayed on Rian. You move like a trained soldier, she said quietly when they were alone. Rian gave a small shrug. I told you before. I have fought before, but not as a common soldier, she pressed. There is skill in you that only years of training can give. I have seen Varelian champions move slower than you. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he said, there are things about my past I have not told you. But know this, I am here to protect you, whatever comes. In the following days, the council learned that the assassins were not Drakthar soldiers, but hired blades from the Outer Rim. They had been paid with stolen Varelian gold. That meant the Drakthar had help inside the Empire, perhaps more than one traitor. The palace guards doubled their efforts, but Rian did not trust numbers alone. He began to walk the halls more often, speaking with servants, learning which guards were reliable and which avoided his gaze. He spent time in the training yard, not to boast, but to quietly test his skill against Varelian fighters. Those who sparred with him were surprised, though smaller in build than most Varelians. Rian could match them move for move. He did not overpower them with strength. He used timing, speed, and precision. Word of his skill began to spread quietly among the guards. One evening, Alvara found him in the courtyard, training with a wooden staff. She watched for a moment before speaking. You are not the man I thought you were when we wed, she said. Rian lowered the staff and looked at her. And is that good or bad? That, she replied, depends on what else you have been hiding. He gave a faint smile. I have hidden only what I thought would not matter here. But the war you face, it changes things. Then perhaps, she said, stepping closer, you should begin telling me everything. Later that night, under the silver glow of the moons, Rian told her more than he had before. He spoke of his time in Earth's elite defense corps, a small, highly trained unit sent to dangerous parts of the galaxy where diplomacy had failed. He had been part of rescue missions, infiltration work, and battles fought in silence where no one would ever know his name. I left it behind because I was tired of living every day like a blade waiting to be used, he said. I thought serving as a diplomat would keep me far from that life. I was wrong. Alvara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, if I had known your past, I would have placed you among my generals from the start. I am not here to take their place, Rian said. I am here to make sure you live to see victory. The next week brought more trouble. A fire broke out in one of the palace storage halls, destroying weapons meant for the border forces. Rion inspected the damage himself and found signs it had been set deliberately. That night, he met Alvaro in the strategy room. "They are still inside your walls," he told her, "and they will keep trying until you cannot defend the capital." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Then we will not wait for them to come to us. We will find them first." Rion nodded. "Then you must let me move freely through the city, without guards. They will not reveal themselves if they know I'm watching." It was a bold request, but Alvaro agreed. From that night on, Rion became more than the queen's husband in the eyes of the palace. He was a shadow within the city, moving quietly, speaking little, but always watching. What no one yet realized was that this quiet human, once seen as nothing more than a diplomatic gesture, was preparing for a fight that would decide the fate of Varelia itself. The capital city of Varelia shone brightly under the midday sun, but the mood inside the palace was heavy. The recent attacks, the traitor at the gate, the assassins, the fire in the storage hall, had shaken even the most loyal members of the queen's court. Rion walked through the long corridors, his steps slow, his mind deep in thought. He had been watching, listening, moving like a shadow for days. But no matter how many small threats he removed, he knew the Drakthar were still moving pieces on the board. The real strike had not yet come. That evening, Queen Alvaro summoned him to the highest balcony. From there, the entire city could be seen: silver towers, bridges lit with glowing lamps, streets filled with merchants and travelers. "Rion," she began, her voice steady but firm, "I have been patient with your silence, but now I need the whole truth. You have saved my life twice. You have uncovered traitors, and you have fought like one of my finest warriors. I can no longer accept the idea that you are only a diplomat." Rion leaned on the stone railing, the wind brushing his face. "If I tell you everything, you may see me differently." Alvaro's eyes did not waver. "Then let me decide for myself." He was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing whether to speak. Then, slowly, he began. "I was born in one of Earth's frontier colonies," he said. "Life there was not easy. Every day we dealt with raiders, storms, and shortages. By the time I was old enough to carry a weapon, I already knew how to defend my home. That was why I was recruited into Earth's elite defense corps when I turned 19. Alvaro listened closely, her hands folded in front of her. "The corps," he continued, "was small, secret, and sent only where ordinary forces could not succeed. We trained for every kind of battle: open combat, infiltration, sabotage, rescue. We learned to move unseen, to strike fast, and to leave without a trace. Our missions were not for glory. Most of the galaxy never knew we were there, and that is how it was meant to be." "You saw much war?" she asked. He nodded. "Too much. I fought on frozen moons, desert worlds, and stations hanging over gas giants. I have stood face to face with enemies who would not hesitate to destroy entire cities. I have lost friends, and I have seen victories no one else will ever write about." Her voice softened slightly. "And why did you leave? 4 years. My life was nothing but orders and missions. Every success led to another fight. I began to wonder if there was any end to it. I wanted peace, a chance to live without waiting for the next battle. So I left. I took work as a negotiator, thinking I could use my training to build peace instead of war." The queen stepped closer. "And yet here you are, in the middle of another war." A faint smile touched his lips. "Peace is not something you can keep if you let others take it from you. And you, Alvaro, are worth defending." For the first time since their marriage, she saw something in his eyes that was not only calm, but also deeply loyal. "You will not be sent away from the fight," she said firmly. "From this moment, you will have my full trust and my full command." The next morning, the queen called the High Council to the war hall. The long table was covered with maps of the border, the river routes, and the capital's defenses. "From this day," she announced, "my husband, Rion of Earth, will serve as my military advisor. His orders will be treated as mine." A murmur moved through the room. General Tharn's brow furrowed. "Your Majesty, with respect, a human?" Alvaro's voice sharpened. "This human has already prevented 2 assassination attempts, and Stop the traitor from opening our gates. How many of you can say the same this month? Silence followed. Tharn's lips tightened, but he did not argue further. Rian stepped forward to the maps. He pointed to a stretch of land between the mountain passes and the southern plains. Here, he said, is where the Drakthar will strike next. Not at the strongholds, but at the supply routes that feed them. If they cut these, the strongholds will fall without a fight. The generals leaned closer to the map. We will need small, fast units. Rian continued. Strike teams that can move quietly, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy can respond. Large armies will be too slow. Alvar nodded. I will select the best warriors for these teams. You will lead them in the days that followed. Rian worked closely with the Queen's guards and soldiers. At first, some doubted him, but after watching him train, they quickly learned why the Queen had placed him in command. He taught them how to fight in close quarters, how to move silently, how to use the terrain as an advantage. He showed them how to read the ground for signs of movement and how to strike quickly, without giving the enemy time to regroup. The warriors respected his skill, even if they did not fully understand his human ways. One evening after training, Alvara visited the yard. She stood at the edge, watching as Rian demonstrated how to take down a larger opponent without relying on strength. When the lesson ended, she approached. You have changed my soldiers, she said. They move differently now, faster, smarter. They are adapting, Rian replied, and they will need to, because the Drakthar will not stop until they reach these walls. Her voice was quiet, and if they do, then we will be ready, he said without hesitation. A week later, scouts returned with urgent news. Drakthar forces had begun massing near the southern border, just as Rian had predicted. The Queen gathered her generals, and this time, no one questioned Rian's place at the table. He laid out the plan, 3 small strike teams, each led by one of the Queen's best captains, moving ahead of the main force to cut off the Drakthar's forward units. Rian himself will lead the most dangerous mission, striking at the enemy's supply base. Hidden in the hills, Alvar looked at him across the table. You risk much, she said. So will every man and woman who fights for the city, he replied. I will not ask them to do what I would not do myself. That night, as he prepared his gear, the Queen came to see him. Rian, she said, when I first met you, I thought you were here only for politics. I did not know the man I had wed. Now I see him, and I am glad. He looked at her for a moment, then gave a small nod. When this is over, I hope you will still feel the same. The next dawn, Rian and his strike team left the capital in silence. Moving toward the southern hills, somewhere beyond them, the Drakthar were preparing for war, and for the first time, the Queen knew her human husband was not only ready for them, but might just be the key to stopping them entirely. The sun had barely risen when Rian and his strike team prepared to leave the capital. The morning light was soft, but the air was thick with tension. Each soldier checked their gear silently, faces steady and focused. Rian looked over his team, a mix of Varelian warriors and human soldiers from Earth. At first, the two groups had kept to themselves. The Varelians were tall and strong, proud of their fighting skills, while the humans were smaller but quick and clever. Some had doubted that they could work well together, but Rian believed in unity. We fight as one, he told them, not as Varelian or human, but as defenders of this world. The soldiers nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Their first destination was the southern border, where the Drakthar forces had gathered. The enemy moved swiftly, hoping to overwhelm the border villages before the Queen's armies could respond. Rian's plan was simple but bold. Instead of waiting for the Drakthar to attack, he would strike first. Using small, fast teams, they would cut off the enemy's supply lines, forcing them to retreat or face starvation. The march to the border was quiet. Rian led from the front, moving easily over rocky hills and through thick forests. His calm presence gave the soldiers confidence even when the path was hard. One evening, as they set camp near a narrow pass, Rian gathered his captains. We must move carefully here, he said, pointing at a map. The Drakthar patrols this area often. If we are seen, they will send reinforcements quickly. One of the Varelian captains, Yarek, frowned. Their numbers are many. Are we strong enough to fight them? Rian looked at him firmly. We don't need to fight their full force. We strike fast, hit their supply wagons, and disappear. Our goal is to weaken them, not to face them head-on. The captains exchanged looks, but trusted Rian's judgment. That night, under the cover of darkness, Rian led a small group toward the enemy's supply route. The forest was quiet except for the soft steps of the soldiers. Suddenly, Rian held up his hand signal to stop. Ahead, he saw the flicker of campfires and heard the low murmur of voices. He whispered, "We wait. Patience now." The soldiers crouched, hiding behind trees and rocks. Rian scanned the camp carefully. Drakthar guards were relaxed, not expecting an attack so close to their base. With steady breath, Rian gave the signal. The team moved swiftly. Silent as shadows, they reached the supply wagons, heavy carts loaded with food, weapons, and medicine. Using tools brought for the mission, the soldiers cut the harnesses and tipped the wagons into the nearby river. The water quickly swept away their precious cargo. Before the Drakthar could react, Rian and his team melted back into the forest. The next morning, the queen received word of the successful strike. Her smile was rare but genuine. "You have done well," she told Rian during a private meeting. "Your courage has given us hope." Rian bowed slightly. "This is only the beginning, Your Majesty. The Drakthar will not stop easily." Days later, the Drakthar forces grew restless. They sent patrols to find the missing supplies and investigate the attack. Rian used this to his advantage. He organized small teams to ambush the enemy patrols, capturing some and sending others fleeing. The soldiers, once doubtful, now moved with purpose and trust in their leader. The bond between the Varelians and humans grew stronger with each shared victory. One afternoon, Rian sat beside Yarek, overlooking a valley where the Drakthar camped. "They are preparing for a big strike," Yarek said. "We must be ready." Rian nodded. "We will not just defend, we will push them back." He stood, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the strength growing inside him. The queen called for a meeting to discuss the next move. Rian presented a plan to launch a surprise attack on the Drakthar's main supply base. "Hidden in the hills, it will be dangerous," he warned. "But if we destroy their supplies, they cannot continue their campaign." Alvara looked at him with respect. "Then you will lead this mission." Rian met her gaze steadily. "I will." The night before the attack, Rian walked through the camp. Soldiers prepared quietly, sharpening blades and checking armor. He stopped by a group of human soldiers, smiling. "Remember, we fight together." They returned the smile. Their spirits lifted. At dawn, the strike team moved out. The journey was tough, through steep hills and thick forests, but Rian's calm leadership kept them going. As they approached the enemy base, the sound of voices and metal clinking grew louder. Rian held up his hand to stop. "Wait for my signal." When the moment came, they rushed forward with a battle cry that surprised the Drakthar. The fight was fierce but quick. Rian's team fought with skill and unity, cutting down enemies and setting fire to wagons and tents. When the smoke cleared, the Drakthar supply base was destroyed. The remaining enemies fled into the hills. Rian looked at his soldiers, proud but serious. "This victory is ours, but the war is not over," he said. Back at the palace, Queen Alvara welcomed the returning team with cheers and gratitude. "You have changed the tide of this war," she told Rian. "Your strength and wisdom have saved many lives." Rian smiled humbly. "It is the courage of these soldiers that wins the day." That night, as the city slept, Alvara and Rian stood on the balcony, looking at the stars. "You have shown me a strength I did not expect," she said softly. Rian took her hand gently. "And you have given me a home worth fighting for." Together, they faced the future, uncertain, but united.